I mentioned I was going to keep bringing in insights and reflections from a physical training space and relating that to voice work, talking about the crossover between the two, how the two shape and influence each other, and yeah, also just acknowledging that working with any physical training approach as a support to underpin any kind of practice or voice use, um, that I'm in a kind of process where I'm tracking that relationship and yeah, drawing insights from that as I'm kind of moving into that territory myself. So yeah, I'm going to keep this one brief, but it's coming back to the planning piece around coming back to an activity or practice after a long time, and the fact that the way that I've approached this has actually been really supported and informed by what I know and understand about my habit forming tendencies, and also my receptivity to certain protocols and structures that I've explored and learned through the musical training and developing my own practice routines for voice, and then using that as a kind of solid template really to think about okay, all I'm doing is adapting the environment and the focus of the task, but the principles around the training and development are really similar, or there are lots of parallels. So, in that respect, something else that is an ongoing learning process, but also something that felt really relevant and helpful, especially after going back to the gym, say, after a long break, was thinking about, okay, what do I now know about myself in relation to a trauma-informed approach that is tailored specifically to my needs and really is bearing in mind what are my unique accessibility requirements and what adaptations reasonably might I need in order to make this transition, and also make the commitment piece and the building and the strengthening of that commitment to integrating something that actually is asking of me. It's asking of me in terms of time, energy, financial investment, and all of that. What can I put in place to ensure that I'm setting myself up for success, not just in terms of, oh, what goals might I want to achieve, but actually to ensure that the process is enjoyable and that I'm reducing risk for myself. So, one thing to mention in that sense was this understanding of what my particular patterns are in terms of how I am in my body and what presents in my body when I'm in a sympathetic response, when I'm activated, when I'm aroused, when something has created overstimulation, or something has given me a shock or a jolt, and what typically goes on in my body. Not just the markers and the kind of common identifiers that we can read about by actually understanding a bit more about general nervous system response, but we are all individually, we have our personal expression of that, and getting to know yourself and getting to know your body, getting to know your emotional landscape, and understanding more about your particular triggers is really helpful if you are trying to design something that is trauma informed and tailor made to you specifically. Because, what is activating for one person simply might not be for someone else. So, with that knowledge and understanding, I was really aware that cardio, for example, would be an area of training development that I would have to be really careful and considered about how I would approach, because the physical effects and the sensations that come about through that increased heart rate and blood circulating through the body and changes in respiratory pattern, all of those indicators and all of those sensations have qualities of sympathetic response in there. And so for me, knowing that, oh, that could actually be an emotional trigger for me, that could be something that gives me a reminder of when was I last in this pattern of breathing, or when did my body last feel in this heightened state when I was kind of really stimulated and my kind of cardio system was activated. So with that knowledge, it's then been about like, okay, I want to ensure that that aspect of training is not neglected, but also how can I approach that and integrate that into routine in a way that feels safe, has a safe entry point and an accessible entry point, and also is controlled in such a way that I can very, very gently build capacity and kind of turn the dial up and increase and improve stamina in that area, but by going at a rate that is slow and is always cross-referencing with that emotional space and kind of felt sense of, okay, just because I'm in this environment focusing on this activity, that awareness can also exist in parallel to an awareness of, oh, there's something here that feels uncomfortable, or it's giving me a kind of body memory of a time where I felt activated, or I felt trapped, or I felt overstimulated, and that those two things can be true at the same time, but that if we are kind of crossing that threshold and we're not able to bring enough of that here and now reference point in a way that is actually supporting us to be reassuring ourselves, like, but this is actually okay and I actually am safe here and everything is good, then that environment, we can really code that environment as somewhere that doesn't feel safe and that we associate with that uncomfortable feeling, and that physical sensation and all of those symptoms that we have maybe previously categorized as being, bad, danger, negative, uncomfortable. So there's definitely something in there for me about reacquainting with certain qualities that are expressed in that sympathetic space that are particularly brought about through cardio work, and therefore doing the weight stuff alongside that and kind of placing more of an emphasis there actually allows me to build a bit more capacity so that when I am approaching those other kinds of exercises, I have resource and I have reference points of what it feels like to push perhaps through a kind of preconceived idea of like, here's a barrier and I'm trying to kind of stretch today and go a bit further than that. And I'm using the words like push and stretch with an intentional quality of that still being a very progressive, step by step, staged process rather than a kind of, rapid acceleration towards, completely flooding yourself with a new baseline to try and meet that actually, instead of it being something that is supportive because of the trauma impacted element that is important to consider there, it's just too much too soon. So it's really interesting to like come back into that particular space and have this head on or this hat on of having your like primary goals related to fitness or whatever else, or well-being, and just having time to connect with your body and all of those great benefits, but then also having this other part of yourself that is advocating for, okay, what are we doing today? How do we feel? What are we going to utilize in the space and time that we're here to continue checking in? And what is the reference point to help us be able to really feel into when we are reaching a kind of threshold that's actually taking us into, oh, this is no longer comfortable and safe actually, and therefore it's counterproductive for what I'm trying to do. And it's important to make the distinction between recognizing what, from a nervous system point of view, will be counterproductive, and then also what is actually about a kind of physical response, or like a internal psychological narrative response to, oh, this is difficult and I don't like this, and like say negative self-talk or kind of anything like that that is maybe more connected to mindset and actually to know yourself well enough and know your internal landscape well enough to be able to discern between those two voices, if you like, so that you can continue in real time to be shifting, changing, and adapting in that space and in that training space, and responsive to like, okay, am I talking myself down here because actually I need to spend 5 minutes getting myself in a good psychological space before approaching this, so that I can actually give myself a bit of a push today and kind of work and strive to achieve something new that maybe does feel a bit, a bit unfamiliar, or there's maybe a bit of risk, a sense of risk attached to it because it is new, and it's something that you haven't done before in this current, iteration of what you're asking your body to do, versus the response that is telling you, I am reaching close to my capacity right now. I don't feel resourced in this moment to be able to feel totally comfortable or totally safe, or there's something going on in the body which is it's maybe historical, it's maybe something in the space that has created a bit of activation, and listening to that and honoring that and recognizing when that is actually going to hinder your progress, and knowing also between those two things when to pause, when to take a break, and when to call it a day and stop. So those are the things that are kind of coming up for me in my awareness at the moment, in terms of the check-in points that are kind of, before, during, and after, so that I can ensure that I'm, actually having a good time and enjoying myself, because it is a privilege to be able to use the body and to strengthen the body. And I think the older you get as well, the more that you're reminded of that. And yeah, so I want to make sure that the process is enjoyable ultimately. But yeah, if any of this is resonating with you on any level of kind of personal development, training, discipline, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And yeah, I will be checking in again soon with more insights and reflections as they are coming through. Stay well and safe, everybody.